All right, you got a test on U.S. History, Chapter 4? You've come to the right place. We're going to cram everything you need to know about that wild century from 1660 all the way to 1763. This is your high-speed, no-fluff review. So let's just get right into it. So here's the first big question you're probably going to see on the exam. England just got through this super messy civil war, right? But then, bam, they come roaring back. So how in the world did they manage to basically double their empire in America, adding huge places like New York, Pennsylvania, and the Carolinas to the map so darn fast? And here's another one, kind of a paradox that your teacher's gonna love. Think about it. A revolution happens all the way over in London, 3,000 miles across the ocean. So how does that end up giving American colonists more rights and strengthening their ideas about freedom? It seems backwards, right? We'll break it down. Okay, get this. This is one of those facts that just stops you in your tracks and shows you how much things were changing. Because of the huge demand for rice and indigo, the slave trade exploded, and the forced migration of Africans was so massive that by 1715, South Carolina actually had a black majority. A majority. That one little fact is absolutely key to understanding, well, pretty much everything about the economy and the tensions of this whole period. All right, so here's our game plan. Super simple. We're hitting 4 big topics. First, the Restoration and those new colonies. Then, the Glorious Revolution and what it meant for rights. After that, we'll look at slavery and consumerism. And we'll wrap up with the big ideas and the big war that changed everything. Let's do it.
Okay, Section 1, the Restoration and New Colonies. So picture this. England has just gone through a whole decade with no king at all. So when Charles II finally gets the throne back, he's got 2 giant problems. He owes a ton of people and he needs to build up the empire. And guess what? America is the answer to both.
Just for some quick context, here's how it went down. 1649, they literally execute the king, Charles I. Off with his head. Then, for about a decade, no king. They call it the interregnum. But you know, people get tired of that, and by 1660, they invite the old king's son, Charles II, to come back. And that's it. That's the Restoration. So, Charles II is back, but he's broke and owes a lot of favors. What's a king to do? He uses land he doesn't even live on. He creates these things called proprietary colonies. This is a key term, folks. It just means he's giving away massive chunks of America to his buddies and people he owes money to. Think of it like the ultimate IOU. Hey, William Penn, thanks for the support. Here's Pennsylvania.
And to make this real, let's look at the Carolinas. The guys the king gave it to, they didn't even go there. Instead, a bunch of English planters from the super wealthy sugar island of Barbados sailed over to what's now Charleston. And they didn't just bring their luggage, they brought a pre-packaged, brutal, ready-to-go system of slavery, perfect for growing the rice and indigo that was about to make them insanely rich.
Okay, so the empire is getting bigger. Now England wants to control the money. So they pass a bunch of laws called the Navigation Acts. The whole idea behind this is something called mercantilism. Fancy word, simple idea. The empire should get rich, not the colonies. So these laws basically said all colonial trade has to go through England, on English ships. So England gets the biggest cut. Simple as that. But, and this is maybe the most important concept from this chapter, so listen up. It's called salutary neglect. Yeah, the Navigation Acts were on the books, they were the official rules, but for a long, long time, Britain was just too busy to really enforce them. This healthy neglect meant colonial merchants could basically do what they wanted. They smuggled, they traded, they got rich, and they got a real taste of economic freedom. So, for this section, just remember this. Charles II used proprietary colonies to rapidly expand England's empire, while the Navigation Acts tried to control its wealth, but mostly failed because of salutary neglect. All right, next up, a massive political earthquake hits England, and the shockwaves are going to ripple all the way across the Atlantic, giving the American colonists a power boost they never saw coming. So here's the deal, the tale of 2 monarchs. You've got King James II. He's Catholic. He loves the idea of having absolute power. And he even creates this thing called the Dominion of New England to totally crush local governments there. He's the bad guy in this story for a lot of people. So Parliament literally fires him, they kick him out, and invite the Protestants William and Mary to take over with one huge condition. You have to sign this Bill of Rights that says we, the Parliament, have power too. And this wasn't just some stuffy political drama happening in London.
Oh no. As soon as the news got to Boston, the colonists basically had their own mini revolution. They got together, arrested the royal governor, Sir Edmund Andros, and completely dismantled that hated Dominion of New England he was running. They were taking back control, just like Parliament was.
And this whole event came with a new political instruction manual written by a guy named John Locke. And his big idea was a game changer. He said government isn't a divine right, it's a contract. You, the people, agree to be governed, and the government, in return, agrees to protect your rights, your life, liberty, and property. And if the government breaks that deal, you have the right to get a new one. This idea became everything to the colonists.
So, the big takeaway here? Remember, the Glorious Revolution limited the king's power and established this powerful idea that English subjects, even if they lived in the colonies, had rights that had to be protected. Okay, so the colonies are getting bigger, and the colonists are feeling a little more confident about their rights. But what's actually making the colonial world go round? What's driving the economy and shaping daily life? It really comes down to two massive forces: the horrific system of slavery and, surprisingly, a brand new obsession with shopping.
And we have to talk about the sheer scale of the slave trade. Just look at one company, the Royal African Company. Between 1672 and 1713, they purchased 125,000 human beings on the African coast. 125,000. And that's just one company. When their monopoly ended, the floodgates opened, and the numbers just exploded. This wasn't a small part of the economy, it was a central pillar.
But please, never think that enslaved people just accepted this. They resisted in countless ways, and the Stonewall Rebellion is one of the most powerful and tragic examples. In 1739, a literate Angolan man named Jemmy led an armed insurrection in South Carolina. They were marching for freedom, headed for Spanish Florida. They were eventually caught and defeated, but this rebellion sent an absolute shockwave of terror through the white slaveholding society. And what was the reaction? It was swift, and it was brutal. In response, South Carolina passed something called the Negro Act of 1740. This new, much harsher slave code was designed to crush any chance of another rebellion. It made it illegal for enslaved people to assemble in groups, to grow their own food, to earn any money, or even to learn how to write. It's a clear lesson. Acts of resistance were met with even more brutal systems of control. Now, at the very same time, something totally different is going on. It's called the Consumer Revolution. Suddenly, all these British-made goods, we're talking tea, books, textiles, furniture, became way more available and affordable. This was huge because it meant that a colonist in Pennsylvania could own the same things and have the same style as someone in London. It tied the colonies in Great Britain together through shared stuff and a shared sense of being British. So for this section, remember this. The empire's whole economy was built on two things at once: the absolutely brutal system of slavery and this new consumer culture that actually tied the colonies closer to Britain. All right, we're in the home stretch, our final section. We've got new ideas sweeping through the colonies, changing how people think about everything from God to science. And it all leads up to a final, decisive, winner-take-all war for North America. So you've got these two big competing ideas spreading like wildfire. You can think of it as a battle between the heart and the head. On one side, you have the Great Awakening, all about emotion, a fiery and personal religious faith. This is where you get preachers like Jonathan Edwards giving these terrifying sermons. On the other side, you've got the Enlightenment, all about reason, science, and observation. And the poster child for this is, of course, Benjamin Franklin. I mean, look at Benjamin Franklin. He is the American Enlightenment, period. The guy founded America's first public library, created the University of Pennsylvania, proved that lightning is electricity. He was a scientist, an inventor, a thinker. His whole deal was using reason and science to make the world a better place. Total Enlightenment guy. Meanwhile, in the background of all this, there's basically one long simmering conflict. For almost 80 years, Britain and France are locked in this epic struggle for who's going to be the global superpower. And while a lot of that fighting happened in Europe, a ton of it happened right here, in the North American frontier. Now, you can think of the first few of these wars as, I don't know, preliminary rounds. They kind of ended in a draw. But the last one, the French and Indian War, that was the main event. This was the decisive winner-take-all fight for North America. And it all kicks off in the American backcountry. So, the big takeaway for this last part? Remember,
While new ideas about religion and reason were sweeping the colonies, this final massive war with France ends with Britain in total control of North America, but also facing a gigantic, crushing debt from the war.
Okay, deep breath. You made it. Now for the final review. Let's do a super fast rundown of what's almost definitely going to be on the test. These are the big ones. First, proprietary colonies. That's how King Charles II paid his debts and grew the empire super fast. Second, navigation acts and salutary neglect. Remember, that's control in theory, but a lot of freedom in practice. Third, the Glorious Revolution. This one's huge. It limited the king's power and gave colonists the ideas of John Locke. Fourth, the Consumer Revolution. British stuff like tea and textiles created a shared British identity. Fifth, the Great Awakening versus the Enlightenment. That's the battle of faith and emotion against reason and science. And finally, the French and Indian War. Britain wins it all, but now they're broke.
And let's end on this one big question. By 1763, Britain and its American colonies are on top of the world. They're unified, they're powerful, the French threat is gone. Things have never been better. So, what could possibly go wrong? How does all of that fall apart in just a few short years? Well, that's what we'll get into next time. For now, good luck on that test. You got this.